About a month ago, my grandson started taking my car out every night, saying he was just practicing driving. I trusted him. But yesterday I checked the GPS history, and what I found made me panic. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The keys jingled in my hand as I stood in the driveway that October evening, watching the taillights of my silver Camry disappear down Maple Street. My grandson, Devin, had asked to borrow the car again, the fourth night in a row. "Just practicing my highway merging, Grandma Diane," he'd said with that crooked smile that reminded me so much of my late son, Terry. I should have felt proud. After all, an 18-year-old eager to improve his driving skills showed responsibility, didn't it? But something in Devin's eyes had changed over the past month. The brightness that once lit up my kitchen when he'd visit had dimmed to something cautious, guarded. He'd lost weight, too. His favorite meals, my pot roast and apple pie, sat barely touched on his plate during our Sunday dinners. "You're imagining things, Diane," I whispered to myself, pulling my cardigan tighter against the autumn chill. At 64, maybe I was just another worrying grandmother, seeing problems where there were none. The wind scattered leaves across my front lawn here in Cedar Falls, Indiana, and I turned back toward the house Terry had grown up in, the house where Devin himself had spent countless summer afternoons learning to ride a bike in this very driveway. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Not after yesterday morning. I'd been cleaning out the hall closet, a task I'd been putting off for months, when I found Terry's old fishing tackle box behind the winter coats. Opening it released a flood of memories. Rusty hooks, faded photographs of father-son camping trips, and tucked in the bottom corner, a small leather journal I'd never seen before. Terry's handwriting filled the pages, entries from his final year before the car accident that took him from us 3 years ago. Most of it was mundane. Work schedules, notes about Devin's baseball games, reminders about household repairs. But one entry, dated 6 months before his death, made my blood run cold. "Saw Vanessa with that man again at Riverside Park. Devin was at school. She thinks I don't know. The way he looked at her. No, the way he looked at our house. I need to be careful. Something about him isn't right. Asked Jim at the station to run a background check. Waiting to hear back. Jim Patterson, Terry's old friend from the police force. I hadn't spoken to Jim in over a year, not since Terry's funeral. But this entry meant Terry had suspected something about Vanessa's boyfriend before he died. And Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, Devin's mother, was still with that man, Matthew Holloway. I'd met Matthew exactly twice. Both times his smile never quite reached his eyes, and he had a way of touching Vanessa's elbow that seemed more possessive than affectionate. She'd met him at some grief support group months before Terry died, and within weeks, he'd moved into their house on Oakmont Drive. Devin never talked about Matthew, not once in 3 years. The journal entry gnawed at me throughout the day. By evening, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Terry had been stressed near the end, working long hours, worried about money. Maybe the background check had come back clean. Maybe Matthew was just socially awkward. Maybe I was a silly old woman grasping at shadows. Then Devin arrived to borrow the car, and I noticed his hands trembling as he took the keys. "Are you feeling all right, honey?" I'd asked, touching his arm. He'd actually flinched before forcing a smile. "Just tired from work, Grandma. You know how it is at the warehouse." But Devin had quit his warehouse job 2 weeks ago. He'd told me he was taking a semester off from community college to figure things out. When I'd asked how he was managing expenses, he'd changed the subject. Now, standing alone in my living room, Terry's journal open on the coffee table, I made a decision. The kind of decision that reasonable, sensible grandmothers probably shouldn't make. I reached for my laptop, the one Devin had helped me set up last Christmas, and navigated to the car insurance website. My auto policy included GPS tracking for a small monthly fee, something the insurance agent had talked me into for safety and theft recovery. I'd never used it before. Never had a reason to. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Was this an invasion of Devin's privacy? Absolutely. Would he be angry if he found out? Probably. But Terry's words echoed in my mind. Something about him isn't right. I clicked through to the GPS history page. The screen loaded, and my heart began to pound. The past 30 days of trips appeared as a list, each one showing the date, time, departure point, and destination. I scrolled through, hands shaking now as much as Devon's had been. The first few nights were innocent enough. Drives around the neighborhood, a trip to the high school parking lot where he'd probably practiced parallel parking. But then, starting 3 weeks ago, a pattern emerged. Every night. Same departure time, 10:30 p.m., multiple stops before returning home around 2 a.m. I clicked on the most recent entry from last night and watched as the route traced itself across the digital map. First stop, 2847 Industrial Boulevard, a warehouse district on the east side of Cedar Falls. Duration, 12 minutes. Second stop, 156 Riverside Apartments. Duration, 8 minutes. Third stop, 45 Hun 21, Highway 37. North, a gas station just outside city limits. Duration, 6 minutes. Fourth stop, 892 Lakeshore Drive. My hand flew to my mouth. I knew that address. Everyone in Cedar Falls knew that address. 892. Lakeshore Drive was the old Brennan estate, a sprawling property that had sat abandoned for 5 years after old Walter Brennan died. The place had been in the news recently, something about the county finally moving to condemn it. But what sent ice through my veins was what else I knew about that property. 2 months ago, the Cedar Falls Gazette had run a front-page story. Police had raided a house on Lakeshore Drive, though they hadn't specified the exact address. They'd discovered what they called a distribution hub for prescription medications being diverted from legitimate pharmacies and sold on the black market. 3 arrests were made, but the article mentioned that investigators believed the operation was much larger, with the main organizers still at large. I clicked back through Devon's GPS history, checking the other addresses. My stomach turned as I cross-referenced them with a quick internet search. The warehouse on Industrial Boulevard belonged to a shipping company that had filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago, its building sitting empty. The Riverside Apartments had been cited by the city for housing code violations and was known as a problem property. Every location Devon had visited was connected to decay, abandonment, or criminal activity. I sat back, my mind racing. Devon wasn't just practicing driving, he was being used as a courier. The timing, the multiple short stops, the late-night hours, it all fit. And somehow, this involved Matthew Holloway. Terry had known. He'd sensed something wrong about Matthew 3 years ago, had tried to investigate. And then, 6 months later, Terry died in a single car accident on a clear night on a road he'd driven 1,000 times. The official report said he'd swerved to avoid a deer. No witnesses, no evidence of foul play. But now, holding this journal, looking at these GPS coordinates, I wondered, what had Jim Patterson found in that background check? Had Terry confronted Matthew? And most terrifying of all, was Devon in the same danger his father had been? I reached for my phone, then stopped. Who would I call? Jim Patterson? I had no evidence, just an old journal entry and GPS data showing my grandson driving at night. Vanessa? She was clearly under Matthew's influence. Devon himself? If I was right and he was being coerced, confronting him directly might make things worse. No, I needed more information. I needed to understand exactly what Devon was involved in and how deep Matthew's control went. And I needed to do it without alerting anyone that I knew. I looked at the journal again, flipping through the pages more carefully this time. Near the back, I found something I'd missed before. A business card tucked into the spine. It was worn and faded, but I could make out the name. Detective Judith Stabenow, Indiana State Police, Special Investigations Unit. A phone number was handwritten on the back, along with Terry's note. Call if anything happens to me. My hands trembled as I pulled out my cell phone. It was 10:15 p.m. In 15 minutes, Devon would be pulling out of Vanessa's driveway in my Camry, beginning his nightly route. And tonight, I would be tracking every movement, documenting every stop, building a case to save my grandson from whatever trap Matthew Holloway had set. But first, I needed to know what Terry had discovered. I needed to know why a state police detective had given my son her personal number. and I needed to know if Terry's death had really been an accident. I dialed the number, listening to it ring once, twice, 3 times. Just as I was about to hang up, a woman's voice answered, professionally crisp despite the late hour. Stabenow. I took a deep breath. Detective Stabenow, my name is Diane Ashford. You knew my son, Terry. He died 3 years ago, and I think— My voice cracked, but I steadied it. I think someone needs to reopen his case, because I believe his son is in danger from the same person who killed him. The silence on the other end stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then, Mrs. Ashford, I've been waiting 3 years for someone in Terry's family to call this number. We need to meet. Tonight. And you need to tell me everything. As I grabbed my purse and Terry's journal, my phone buzzed with a GPS notification. Devin had just left Vanessa's house in my car, heading toward Industrial Boulevard. The investigation was beginning, but I had no idea how deep the shadows went, or how many secrets were still waiting to be uncovered in the darkness of those late-night drives through Cedar Falls. Detective Judith Stabenow wasn't what I expected. At 40-something, with gray streaks threading through her dark hair and tired lines around her eyes, she looked like someone who'd seen too much and slept too little. She arrived at my house within 30 minutes of my call, driving an unmarked sedan that she parked 2 houses down. Just in case, she'd said cryptically. Now she sat at my kitchen table, Terry's journal open before her, while my laptop displayed Devin's GPS route in real time. The blue dot representing my Camry had just left the warehouse on Industrial Boulevard and was heading toward Riverside Apartments. Mrs. Ashford. Diane, please. Diane. She gave me a tired smile. I need you to understand something before we go any further. What I'm about to tell you is information from an ongoing investigation. Technically, I shouldn't be sharing any of it. But Terry was a good man, and he was trying to protect his family when he died. You deserve to know the truth. My throat tightened. So it wasn't an accident. I don't know. Her honesty caught me off guard. Terry contacted me 4 months before he died. He'd run into me at a law enforcement conference in Indianapolis. We'd worked together on a case about 8 years prior. He pulled me aside, said he needed someone outside the local department to look into something, someone he could trust. Matthew Holloway. She nodded, pulling out a tablet and swiping through files. Terry suspected that Matthew wasn't who he claimed to be, said his gut told him something was off. Matthew had no social media presence before 2 years ago, claimed he'd moved to Indiana from Arizona for a fresh start, worked cash jobs, rented under someone else's name. All legal, but unusual. So Terry asked me to dig deeper. What did you find? Detective Stabenow turned the tablet toward me. A photograph showed Matthew Holloway, or someone who looked exactly like him, but younger, with darker hair and a different name beneath. Martin Hollis. Matthew Holloway doesn't exist, she said quietly. Not before 3 years ago, but Martin Hollis does. He was arrested in Phoenix 7 years ago for insurance fraud and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. Served 18 months, got out, and disappeared. Changed his name legally through a court in Nevada, moved to Indiana, and reinvented himself. My hands clenched on the table. And Vanessa has no idea. Your daughter-in-law is a grieving widow who met a charming man at a support group. Martin, he's good at finding vulnerable people. That's his pattern. Uses other people to do his work. Never touches the product himself. Never makes direct threats. He's a ghost who manipulates others into taking all the risks. On my laptop screen, the blue dot stopped at Riverside Apartments. 12 minutes, just like every other night. I imagined Devin sitting in my car, hands shaking, delivering something he shouldn't be delivering to people he shouldn't know. Why didn't you arrest him after Terry contacted you? Because we needed evidence that would stick. Terry was gathering information for me, documenting Matthew's movements, recording conversations, trying to establish a pattern. Then Terry died, and the investigation stalled. Without him, we had nothing concrete. Matthew went quiet for almost a year after that. Now he's active again, and it looks like he's using your grandson. The words hit me like a physical blow. Devin's just a boy. He's only 18. That's exactly why Matthew chose him. Legal adult, but still young enough to manipulate. Clean record, grieving his father, probably desperate for a male role model. And if Devin gets caught, Matthew has plausible deniability. He'll claim he had no idea what Devin was doing. I watched the blue dot begin moving again, toward the gas station on Highway 37. We have to stop this. We have to get Devin out. I agree. But Diane, if we move too fast, Matthew will disappear again. He's done it before. And worse, if he thinks Devin might talk to police, Devin becomes a liability. The implication made my blood run cold. You think Matthew would hurt him? I think Matthew has already hurt people who became inconvenient. She closed the tablet, her expression grave. Terry's accident happened on a clear night. No skid marks suggesting he tried to brake. The investigating officer noted that the steering column showed signs of possible tampering, but the car burned after the crash, destroying most of the evidence. Even with Terry's body, and with the case closed, there was nothing to pursue. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't help Devin. So what do? We need Devin to come to us voluntarily. If we approach him, Matthew will know. He's probably monitoring Devin's phone, his social media, maybe even planted surveillance in Vanessa's house. We need Devin to realize he's in danger and seek help on his own terms. How do I make that happen without alerting Matthew? Detective Stabenow leaned forward. Very carefully. You're his grandmother. You can express concern about his well-being without raising suspicion. The key is to plant seeds. Make him question what he's doing, who he's doing it for, and what the consequences might be. Meanwhile, I'll work on building a case against Matthew from my end. We need physical evidence linking him to the distribution operation. The blue dot reached the gas station, stopped for 6 minutes, then continued north toward Lakeshore Drive, toward the condemned Brennan estate where police had already raided once. Can't you just arrest everyone there? I gestured at the screen. We raided that property 2 months ago, made 3 arrests, but they were low-level dealers. The main operation moved, and we haven't found the new location. That's why Devin's GPS data is so valuable. It gives us current addresses. But we need to move carefully. If Matthew suspects we're watching, he'll shut everything down and set up somewhere else. A car door slammed outside. We both froze. Through my kitchen window, I saw headlights in the driveway next door. Just my neighbor, Bill, coming home late from his shift at the hospital. Detective Stabenow relaxed, but I noticed her hand had moved instinctively toward her hip, where I assumed she carried a weapon. You need to be careful too, Diane. If Matthew finds out you're investigating, I'm 64 years old. What's he going to do? Intimidate me? Her expression was deadly serious. Yes, that's exactly what he'll do. These people don't see age or gender. They see threats. You need to promise me you won't do anything without calling me first. I nodded, though something rebellious stirred in my chest. I'd raised a son, buried a husband, survived cancer 5 years ago. I wasn't some fragile flower who'd wilt at the first sign of trouble. Detective Stabenow's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned. I have to go. Another case requiring my attention. But Diane, I mean it. Stay in touch. Document everything. Save Terry's journal somewhere safe. And whatever you do, act normal around Devin. Don't let him see that you're worried. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, watching the blue dot complete its route. Devin returned to Vanessa's house at 1:47 a.m. The car stayed there. He'd bring it back to me tomorrow morning, as always, with a casual, "Thanks, Grandma," and that hollow look in his eyes. I couldn't sleep. Instead, I spent the night reading through every page of Terry's journal more carefully. Near the end, I found another entry that made my breath catch. Confirmed. Matthew is using Vanessa's bank account to launder money. Small deposits always under $10,000 to avoid triggering reports. She thinks it's rental income from a property he owns in Arizona. She has no idea she's complicit. If this goes south, she could face charges too. Need to find a way to protect her and Devin before this explodes. My daughter-in-law, sweet, naive Vanessa who'd fallen apart after Terry died, who'd clung to Matthew like a life raft. She was being used just as much as Devin was. The next morning, Devin arrived at 9 o'clock to return my car. I was ready, had practiced my expression in the mirror. Concerned grandmother. Nothing more. Good morning, sweetheart. How was the driving practice? Fine, Grandma. He handed me the keys, avoiding eye contact. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that made him fidget. Devin, honey, you look tired. Are you sleeping all right? Just been busy. You know how it is. Sit down. Let me make you breakfast. You're too thin. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Then his stomach growled audibly and he managed a weak smile. Okay, thanks. As I prepared scrambled eggs and toast, his favorite since childhood, I chose my words carefully. I've been thinking about your father lately, about how much he loved you, how proud he was of you. Devin's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Yeah, I miss him. He always said the most important thing in life was integrity, making choices you could be proud of, even when they're difficult. I set down my coffee cup, meeting his eyes. Devin, if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone's asking you to do something that doesn't feel right, something your father wouldn't be proud of, you can always come to me. No judgment, no questions. Just help. His face went pale. For just a second, I saw the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and hurt feelings. Then the mask came back, and he shook his head. I'm fine, Grandma. Really, everything's fine. But his hands were shaking again, and when he left 20 minutes later, I noticed he'd barely touched his food. I spent the rest of the day feeling like I was walking on eggshells. Every time my phone rang, I jumped. Every car that passed my house made me nervous. Detective Stabenow had said to act normal, but how could anything be normal when my grandson was delivering contraband for a criminal who might have killed his father? That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions. Mind your own business. My blood turned to ice. I immediately called Detective Stabenow. Someone knows I'm investigating, I told her, reading the message aloud. Did Devin mention your conversation to anyone? He must have. He went straight home after breakfast. If Matthew was there. Okay, this is actually good news. Good news? They're threatening me. It means you got under Matthew's skin. He's worried. When people like him get worried, they make mistakes. She paused. But Diane, you need to back off for a few days. Let him think the threat worked. Meanwhile, I'm going to increase surveillance on your house and Vanessa's. If Matthew makes a move, we'll see it. After we hung up, I sat in my darkening living room, staring at that text message. Someone was watching me. Someone knew I'd talked to Devin. And somewhere across town, my grandson was trapped in a nightmare I'd barely begun to understand. The phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. My heart hammered as I opened it. But this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a photograph. My car. My license plate. Taken from across the street within the last hour. The message underneath read, "Pretty car. Would be a shame if something happened to it. Or to the people you love." I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every passing car, every shadow moving across my bedroom wall sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. At 64, I'd thought I was past the age of being truly frightened. I was wrong. By dawn, I'd made a decision. Detective Stabenow wanted me to back off, to let Matthew think his threats had worked. But backing off meant leaving Devin in danger for days, maybe weeks, while she built her case. I couldn't do that. I was his grandmother. If I wouldn't protect him, who would? The plan formed slowly, carefully. I needed to see inside Vanessa's house without arousing suspicion. I needed to find evidence of Matthew's operation, something concrete that would force Detective Stabenow to act immediately. And I needed to do it in a way that seemed completely natural. At 8 o'clock, I called Vanessa. Good morning, sweetheart. I know this is short notice, but I was going through some boxes in the attic and found Terry's baseball card collection. I thought Devin might want it. Vanessa's voice sounded strained, tired. Oh, Diane, that's so thoughtful. But maybe you could just drop it off on the porch? I'm not feeling well today. Nonsense, I'll bring soup too. You probably caught that flu that's going around. I kept my tone light, grandmotherly. I'll be there around noon. Don't worry about tidying up. I'm family. There was a long pause. Then, Okay. Noon is fine. Thank you. The hesitation in her voice told me everything. Matthew didn't want visitors. But Vanessa couldn't refuse her dead husband's mother without seeming ungrateful or suspicious. I spent the morning preparing. I made chicken soup, Terry's favorite recipe. I found the baseball card collection, carefully preserved in a leather album. And I charged my phone fully, making sure the voice recording app was easily accessible. If I was going into Matthew's territory, I'd document everything. Vanessa's house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The lawn needed mowing, and the gutters were clogged with autumn leaves. Terry would have been heartbroken to see his home falling into disrepair. I knocked, holding the soup container and album. Vanessa answered, and my heart sank. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging loose on her frame. Her blonde hair, once so carefully styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. But it was her eyes that shocked me. They had the same hollow, frightened look I'd seen in Devon's. "Diane, come in." She glanced nervously over her shoulder as I entered. The house was different. The family photos that once lined the hallway were gone, replaced by nothing. The living room furniture had been rearranged, creating a clear sightline from the front door to the back of the house. Strategic. Defensive. This was how someone lived when they were always watching for threats. "Where's Devon?" "At work." She took the soup container with trembling hands. "He picked up a new job. Night shift at a distribution center." A lie. Devon had told me he was taking time off. Why would Vanessa lie about something so basic unless she was covering for him, or for Matthew? And Matthew? He's around, running errands. Another glance toward the hallway. The baseball cards are wonderful. Devon will love them. I set the album on the coffee table and noticed something that made my blood run cold. Partially hidden under a magazine was a prepaid cell phone, the kind people use when they don't want calls traced. And next to it, a small notebook with addresses written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Blocky, masculine letters. Matthew's handwriting. "Vanessa, honey, can I use your restroom?" "Of course. You know where it is." As I walked down the hallway, I activated my phone's recording app and slipped it into my cardigan pocket, microphone facing out. Every door I passed was closed except one, Terry's old home office. The door stood ajar, and I could see inside. The office had been transformed. Terry's desk was gone. In its place stood a folding table covered with manila envelopes, each labeled with dates and addresses. A laptop sat open, its screen dark. And on the wall, someone had taped a map of Cedar Falls with locations marked in red ink. I recognized those locations. The warehouse on Industrial Boulevard, Riverside Apartments, the Brennan Estate, and others, at least a dozen more, spread across the city like a spider's web. My hands shook as I took my phone from my pocket and snapped 3 quick photos. The flash seemed impossibly bright in the dim hallway. I'd just pocketed the phone when I heard the front door open. "Vanessa? Whose car is that outside?" Matthew's voice. Sharp. Suspicious. I flushed the toilet and ran the bathroom sink, buying precious seconds. When I emerged, Matthew stood in the hallway between me and the living room, blocking my exit. "Diane." His smile was cold. What a surprise. "Matthew, I was just bringing some soup and old keepsakes for Devon." I forced myself to meet his eyes, to keep my voice steady. "Vanessa said you were out running errands." Plans changed. He didn't move from the hallway. Up close, I could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he was assessing me as a threat. "That's thoughtful of you. But Vanessa needs her rest. Maybe you should head home." "Of course." I moved toward him, and for a terrifying moment, he didn't step aside. We stood there, grandmother and predator, in the narrow hallway where my son once hung family photos. Then Matthew moved, just enough to let me pass. In the living room, Vanessa stood rigid, her face pale. "Thank you for coming, Diane. I'll make sure Devon gets the cards." "Actually," Matthew said from behind me, his voice casual but with an edge of steel, "why don't we all sit down for a minute? I'd love to hear more about Terry. Vanessa's told me so much, but I never got to meet him myself. It wasn't a request. I could feel the threat underlying every word. He wanted to know what I knew, why I was really here. I sat on the sofa, arranging my features into polite interest. Terry was wonderful. Dedicated father, hard worker, very protective of his family. I let the emphasis hang in the air. He always said family comes first, no matter what. Matthew settled into the armchair across from me, completely relaxed, utterly confident. Protective? That's interesting. Did he ever talk about his work? The people he investigated? So he knew Terry had been a police officer. Of course he did. He'd probably researched every detail of Terry's life before approaching Vanessa. Sometimes, he believed in justice, in making sure dangerous people were held accountable. I folded my hands in my lap, channeling every ounce of Terry's courage. He once told me that the worst criminals are the ones who hide in plain sight, who manipulate good people into doing bad things. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Matthew's smile never wavered, but his eyes went flat. Dead. That's very philosophical. Terry sounds like he was quite the detective. He was. And thorough. He always said loose ends have a way of unraveling everything. Vanessa made a small, choked sound. Matthew shot her a look that silenced her immediately. Well? Matthew stood abruptly. We shouldn't keep you. I'm sure you have things to do. I rose, my legs steadier than I'd expected. As I moved toward the door, I turned back to Vanessa. Sweetheart, if you ever need anything at all, you call me, day or night. Promise? Tears welled in her eyes. I promise. Matthew walked me to my car, his hand on my elbow in a grip that looked friendly but felt like a vice. Diane, I hope you're not worrying unnecessarily about Devin. He's doing great. Really found his stride lately. It would be a shame if someone planted doubts in his head, made him question the good things in his life. Funny, I said, opening my car door. I was thinking the same thing. It would be a shame if someone was manipulating him, using him. His father would have destroyed anyone who tried to hurt his son. Matthew's grip tightened for just a second, then released. Have a safe drive home. These roads can be dangerous, especially for older drivers. I drove away with my heart pounding, watching him in my rearview mirror until I turned the corner. Only then did I pull over, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. The photos were still there. The office, the map, the envelopes. Evidence. I forwarded them immediately to Detective Stabenow with a text. We need to talk, now. Her response came within seconds. Coffee shop on Main Street, 20 minutes. Detective Stabenow was waiting in a back booth when I arrived. I slid the phone across to her, watching as she scrolled through the photos. This is good, Diane. Really good. These addresses give us... She stopped, her expression changing. Wait, this location here. She pointed to a spot on the map in one of my photos. That's not a known distribution point. What is it? It's a storage facility on the county line. We've had no activity there on our radar. She zoomed in on the photo. But look at this notation. Primary, Friday delivery. That's tomorrow night. What does that mean? It means that's where they're keeping the main supply. Everything Devin's been picking up and delivering? That's just small batches for street-level dealers. But the storage facility is where the bulk shipment is. She looked up at me, and I saw excitement mixed with concern. If we can catch Matthew with that shipment, we can put him away for 20 years. But Diane, this changes everything. If Matthew suspects we're onto him, he already suspects. He threatened me, told me these roads are dangerous for older drivers. Her jaw tightened. Then we're out of time. I need to coordinate a raid for tomorrow night, and you need to disappear for 48 hours. Go stay with a friend out of town. Get away from Cedar Falls until this is over. I'm not leaving Devin. Diane? No. I leaned forward. That's my grandson. If you're raiding that facility tomorrow night, Matthew will know his operation is compromised. What do you think he'll do to Devin? To Vanessa? They're witnesses. They're liabilities. He'll either force them to run with him or... I couldn't finish the sentence. Detective Stabenow's expression told me she'd already considered that possibility. So what do you suggest? Get Devin out first. Tomorrow afternoon before the raid? I'll figure out how. And if Matthew notices Devin's missing before we make our move, he'll run. We'll lose him. Then we have to make sure Matthew doesn't notice until it's too late. An idea was forming, dangerous and desperate. What if Matthew thinks Devin is just where he's supposed to be? I don't follow. Tomorrow night, Devin is supposed to make his deliveries, right? What if someone else drives my car along that same route? Someone who looks enough like Devin from a distance that Matthew won't know the difference. Detective Stabenow stared at me. You're not suggesting... I'm 64 years old, Detective. In the dark, wearing Devin's jacket and a baseball cap. I could pass for a teenager at a distance. Matthew won't be watching closely. He never has before. He'll see my car making the usual stops at the usual times and assume everything's normal. Meanwhile, Devin is somewhere safe, and you're moving in on the storage facility. Absolutely not. That's too dangerous. You're not trained for... I'm trained to protect my family. I met her eyes. And unless you have a better plan to keep Devin alive, this is what we're doing. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, if we do this, and I mean if, you follow every instruction I give you exactly. You wear a wire, you have backup at every location, and the second anything goes wrong, you abort. Agreed. And we get Devin out tomorrow morning, before Matthew wakes up. Can you make that happen? I thought of Vanessa's hollow eyes, her trembling hands. She was trapped, yes, but she was still a mother, and mothers protect their children, even when they're terrified. Yes, I'll make it happen. We spent the next hour planning every detail. Detective Stabenow would have undercover officers at each delivery location. I'd wear a wire and a GPS tracker. The raid on the storage facility would happen at midnight, right after I completed the fake delivery route. As I drove home, my phone rang. Unknown number. My stomach clenched as I answered. Hello? Heavy breathing. Then a young man's voice, barely above a whisper. Grandma? I need help. I can't do this anymore. But if I stop, he said he'll... The line went dead. Devin. That was Devin's voice. I tried calling back, but the number was disconnected. My hand shook on the steering wheel. He'd reached out. He'd asked for help, but someone had stopped him before he could finish. When I got home, there was a car parked across the street. Dark sedan, tinted windows, watching my house. The game had changed. Matthew knew I was a threat. Devin was trying to escape. And tomorrow night, everything would either end in justice or disaster. I walked into my house, locked the door, and called Detective Stabenow again. He knows, I said without preamble. Devin tried to call me. Someone cut him off, and there's surveillance outside my house. Okay, we're moving up the timeline. We get Devin out tonight. I'm sending 2 officers to your location now. Pack a bag. You're both going into protective custody until this is over. What about Vanessa? I'll have officers pick her up, too. If Matthew is escalating, no one in that family is safe. As I threw clothes into an overnight bag, my doorbell rang. I froze. Through the window, I could see a figure on my porch, too tall to be Detective Stabenow, too broad to be Devin. The doorbell rang again. Then a voice. Diane? I know you're home. We need to talk about Devin, about the choices you're making. Open the door. Don't make this difficult. Matthew. He was on my porch, between me and escape. And through my living room window, I could see the dark sedan pulling into my driveway, blocking my car. My phone was in my hand, Detective Stabenow still on the line. I muted the microphone and pressed it against my chest, my mind racing. Matthew was at my front door. A car blocked my driveway. And somewhere in this neighborhood, police officers were supposedly on their way. The doorbell rang a third time, followed by knocking. Firm, insistent. Diane, I saw you come home 10 minutes ago. I'm not leaving until we talk. You've put me in a difficult position, made me worry about misunderstandings. His voice was calm, reasonable. That's what made it terrifying. This wasn't a man losing control. This was calculated intimidation. I unmuted the phone and whispered, He's at my door. Car in the driveway. Officers are 3 minutes out, Detective Stabenow said urgently. Do not open that door. Can you get to a back exit? I moved quietly toward my kitchen, where a door led to the backyard. Through the window above the sink, I saw another figure. A man I didn't recognize, standing near my fence, smoking a cigarette and watching the house. There's someone in back too. Damn it. Okay, new plan. You're going to open the door, but you're going to keep me on this call in your pocket. I'll hear everything. Keep Matthew talking. 2 minutes, Diane. That's all we need. 2 minutes. 120 seconds between me and safety. Or between me and disaster. I walked to the front door, my overnight bag still sitting in the hallway where I'd dropped it. Through the peephole, Matthew stood alone on the porch, hands casually in his pockets, looking for all the world like a concerned neighbor paying a friendly visit. I slipped my phone into my cardigan pocket, made sure the call was still active, and opened the door. But only a crack, the chain lock still engaged. Matthew. This isn't a good time. I understand. I know my visit earlier was tense. I wanted to apologize. His smile was practiced, almost genuine. I worry about Vanessa and Devin. Sometimes that makes me protective in ways that might seem aggressive. You're family, Diane. We should be on the same side. We are on the same side. I want what's best for my grandson. Exactly. That's why I'm here. He glanced at the overnight bag visible through the doorway. Going somewhere? Visiting a friend in Indianapolis, just for the weekend. That's good. A break would do you good. He shifted his weight, and I caught a glimpse of something under his jacket. A phone holster? Or something else? Before you go, though, I think you should know something about Devin. Something that might change how you see his current situation. Despite my fear, curiosity won. What about Devin? Matthew's expression shifted, became almost sympathetic. He came to me, Diane, 2 months ago. He was drowning in debt, credit cards, a loan for a car he couldn't afford, money he'd borrowed from the wrong people. People who don't accept late payments. He was desperate, asked if I knew any way to make fast money. I tried to help. By making him a drug courier? The words were out before I could stop them. Matthew's face went very still. Is that what you think this is about? Drugs? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Diane, you've been watching too many crime shows. Devin does delivery work for my consulting business. Completely legal. Documents, client files, things that need to be hand-delivered for confidentiality. The late hours are because my clients value discretion. Documents? To abandoned warehouses and condemned buildings? Affordable office space in economically depressed areas. It's how small businesses survive. He leaned closer to the crack in the door. But since you're clearly concerned, why don't you ask Devin yourself? In fact, why don't we call him right now? Get everything out in the open? He pulled out his phone, and my heart sank. If he called Devin now, if he put us on speaker, I'd have to maintain this charade while knowing police were minutes away. One wrong word could tip him off. That's not necessary. I insist. He was already dialing. Devin needs to know his grandmother has concerns. Family shouldn't have secrets. The phone rang. Once. Twice. On the third ring, Devin's voice came through, groggy and confused. Matthew? It's barely noon? What's... Devin, I'm at your grandmother's house. She has some questions about the work you've been doing for me. I thought you could help clear things up. There was a long pause. I could hear Devin breathing, the panic evident even through the phone line. What kind of questions? She seems to think you're involved in something illegal. That I'm... How did she put it? Making you a drug courier. Matthew's tone was light, almost amused, but I caught the underlying threat. Tell her that's not true, Devin. Tell her exactly what you do for me. Another pause. Longer this time. When Devin spoke, his voice was flat, defeated. Grandma, I deliver documents. Business files. That's all. It's legitimate work. You see? Matthew smiled at me. Just a misunderstanding. Your grandmother cares about you, Devin. Maybe too much. Sometimes love makes people see problems that aren't there. Can I go back to sleep now? Devin's voice cracked slightly. Of course. Sorry to wake you. We'll talk later. Matthew ended the call and pocketed his phone. Feel better now, Diane? He sounded scared. He sounded tired. Night shift work is exhausting. Matthew glanced over his shoulder at the car in my driveway. Look, I know you don't trust me. That's fine. But you should trust Devin. He's an adult making his own choices. If you keep questioning those choices, keep trying to interfere, you're going to push him away. Is that really what you want? In the distance, I heard sirens. Faint, but growing closer. Matthew heard them too. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation. Adjustment. Sounds like someone's having an emergency. I should let you get on with your packing. He stepped back from the door, then paused. Oh, one more thing. That friend you're visiting in Indianapolis? Tell them Diane says hello, and that you'll be staying longer than expected. Ice flooded my veins. He knew I didn't have a friend in Indianapolis. He was telling me he'd checked, that he knew I was lying. Have a safe trip, Diane. Drive carefully, especially on Highway 37. There have been so many accidents there lately. He walked down my porch steps, unhurried, confident. The car in my driveway started up, and both vehicles left just as a police cruiser turned onto my street. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against the wall, shaking. From my pocket, Detective Stabenow's voice. Diane? Are you there? Are you all right? I pulled out the phone. He knew. About Indianapolis, about everything. And he brought up Highway 37. That's where Terry died. I heard. We got most of it recorded. That was good work, keeping him talking. She paused. But Diane, he said something that worries me. Staying longer than expected. He's planning something. We need to move now. Officers are at your door. 2 uniformed officers came inside, swept the house, and confirmed it was clear. Within 15 minutes, I was in an unmarked police car heading toward a safe house on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. As we drove, Detective Stabenow called with an update. We picked up Vanessa. She's safe, asking about Devin constantly. But Diane, there's a problem. What kind of problem? Devin's gone. We sent officers to his apartment. He moved out of Vanessa's house last month, did you know that? I hadn't. Another secret. Where is he? We don't know. His landlord said he left this morning with 2 suitcases and a month's rent in cash. Told her he was going away for a while. Matthew must have warned him after our conversation. Told him to run. Or took him. The words came out as barely a whisper. We're working every lead. But Diane, I need you to think. Did Devin ever mention any place he might go? Somewhere he felt safe? A friend's house? A favorite spot from childhood? I closed my eyes, thinking back through 18 years of memories. Devin, as a toddler, as a boy, as a teenager. Where had he always gone when he was scared or upset? Then it hit me. The cabin. Terry's hunting cabin up near Monroe Lake. Terry took Devin there every summer until Terry died. It's remote, off the grid, about 90 miles north of here. Do you have an address? No address. It's deep in the woods, accessible only by an old logging road. But I know how to get there. I went with them once, years ago. Then you're going to take us there. Now. Detective Stabenow's voice was firm. If Devin's running, that's where he'd go. It's isolated, familiar, and Matthew might not know about it. But if Matthew does know, then we'd better get there first. The safe house was abandoned in favor of immediate action. Detective Stabenow met us with 2 other plainclothes officers and a detailed county map. I traced the route as best I could remember, Highway 37 north, then a series of unmarked rural roads, finally a turnoff that wasn't on any map. The logging road is overgrown, I explained. You can barely see it from the main road. There's an old mailbox marker, number 47. That's the only indication. From there, it's another 2 miles through the woods. How long since you've been there? 10 years. Maybe more. We drove in 2 vehicles, Detective Stabenow and I in one, 2 officers in another. As we headed north on Highway 37, I couldn't stop thinking about Terry's last drive on this road. Had Matthew arranged that accident? Had he somehow known Terry was getting too close to the truth? The landscape changed from suburban sprawl to farmland to dense forest. I watched for landmarks, trying to remember the turns Terry had taken so many years ago. There, I pointed to a rusted mailbox leaning at an angle. Number 47. The logging road should be just past it. Detective Stabenow slowed, and we all saw it. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt, leading into the overgrown path between the trees. Someone had been here recently. Could be hunters. one of the officers suggested. Or it could be Devin, Detective Stabenow said. Or Matthew. Everyone stay alert. We parked and continued on foot. The officers drew their weapons, moving with practiced silence through the undergrowth. My heart pounded as we walked deeper into the woods, following those tire tracks through mud and fallen leaves. After 20 minutes, we saw it, the cabin, smaller than I remembered, with a sagging porch and broken windows. And parked behind it, partially hidden by brush, was my silver Camry. That's my car, I whispered. Detective Stabenow held up a hand, signaling everyone to stop. She moved closer, peering through the cabin's grimy windows. Then she turned back, her face grim. He's in there. I can see someone moving, but I don't think he's alone. My blood ran cold. Matthew? Can't tell. But there are 2 people inside, and it looks like they're arguing. One of the officers radioed for backup, keeping his voice barely audible. We had at least 30 minutes before more units could arrive from the nearest station. 30 minutes where Devin might be in danger. We should wait for backup, the officer whispered. But Detective Stabenow was studying the cabin, calculating angles and approaches. If that's Matthew in there with Devin, we don't have 30 minutes. If he's planning to eliminate a witness, he'll do it and disappear before backup arrives. What do we do? I asked. She looked at me, then at the cabin. You're going to knock on that door. What? Think about it. If Devin's in there, he'll open the door for his grandmother. If Matthew is in there, he won't risk violence with witnesses present. Not immediately. It gives us an opening to assess the situation and intervene if necessary. And if he has a weapon? If he decides I'm too much of a threat? Then we go in immediately. But Diane, right now, you're our best chance of getting Devin out of there alive. Will you do it? I thought of Terry, of the journal he'd left behind, the warnings he'd tried to give, of Devin's trembling hands and hollow eyes, of that phone call where he'd begged for help before being cut off. Yes, I'll do it. Detective Stabenow positioned the officers at different angles around the cabin while I approached the front door. Each step felt like walking through water, my legs heavy with fear. But I kept moving, kept thinking about Devin as a little boy, laughing as Terry taught him to fish off this very porch. I knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the clearing. Inside, the arguing stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened a crack, and Devin's face appeared, pale, exhausted, terrified. Grandma, how did you... He didn't finish. The door was yanked open wider, and I found myself staring at Matthew Holloway. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, I saw someone I hadn't expected, someone whose presence made all the pieces suddenly click into a horrifying new pattern. Jim Patterson, Terry's old friend from the police force, the one Terry had asked to run a background check on Matthew 3 years ago. And Jim was holding a gun pointed directly at Devin's head. Hello, Diane, Jim said calmly. I was wondering when you'd figure out where he'd gone. Come inside. We have a lot to discuss about your son's accident. And about what happens to people who ask too many questions. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at Jim Patterson's gun pressed against Devin's temple. My grandson's eyes were wide with terror, his hands raised, body trembling. Behind them, Matthew leaned against the cabin wall with his arms crossed, looking almost bored, as if threatening teenagers at gunpoint was just another Tuesday afternoon. Inside Diane, slowly, Jim's voice was steady, professional, the same voice that had spoken at Terry's funeral, praising his dedication and friendship. Hands where I can see them. I stepped into the cabin, raising my hands. The interior was exactly as I remembered. Rough wood walls, a stone fireplace, dusty furniture covered in old sheets. Except now it held my terrified grandson and 2 men who'd already killed once. Close the door. I did, hearing it click shut behind me. Through the grimy windows, I couldn't see Detective Stabenow or the other officers, but I knew they were out there. They'd heard everything through my phone, still recording in my pocket. I just needed to keep Jim and Matthew talking long enough for them to position themselves. Jim, I kept my voice steady, conversational. Terry trusted you. He asked you to run a background check on Matthew. You were his friend. I was. Jim's expression didn't change. And that's why I tried to warn him off. Told him Matthew came back clean, nothing to worry about. But Terry wouldn't let it go. Kept digging. Started asking questions about financial records, property deeds, pharmaceutical shipments. He was a good detective, Diane. Too good. So you killed him. The words hung in the air between us. I arranged an accident, Jim corrected. There's a difference. No malice, just necessity. Terry was going to expose an operation that benefits a lot of people. People who pay very well for discretion. Matthew pushed off from the wall, his casual demeanor shifting to something more alert. This is touching, really. But we have a problem to solve. Devin here made some unfortunate choices today. Packed his bags, took money that didn't belong to him, ran away, made it look like he was going to talk to police. I didn't take anything, Devin's voice cracked. You told me to pack, said we were relocating the operation. Quiet. Jim pressed the gun harder against his head, and Devin went silent, tears streaming down his face. I forced myself to look at Matthew, not at the gun. What do you want? What I want, Matthew said slowly, is for this situation to resolve cleanly. Devin disappears. Tragic young man, overwhelmed by grief over his father, ran away, maybe had an accident in these woods. You, grieving grandmother, came looking for him, got lost, hypothermia. Very sad, but these things happen. You think people won't ask questions? Detective Stabenow knows I'm here. Detective Stabenow. Matthew smiled. Yes, we know all about your conversations with her. Very thorough, our Judith. Been investigating me for 2 years with nothing to show for it. But here's what she doesn't know. She has a leak in her department. Has for years. How do you think we've stayed ahead of every raid, every investigation? He gestured to Jim, and understanding crashed over me. Jim wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was their inside man, feeding them information about ongoing investigations. Judith's good, Matthew continued. But she's not here, is she? And even if she were, Jim's a decorated officer with 30 years on the force. Who do you think the department will believe? The detective with a vendetta against an innocent businessman, or the veteran cop who can prove you and your grandson were involved in the very crimes you were supposedly investigating? That's insane. No one would believe. Evidence is a powerful thing. Jim reached into his jacket, keeping the gun steady on Devin, and pulled out a plastic bag filled with prescription pill bottles. Found in your grandson's car. Your car, technically, which you so helpfully lent him. Your prints all over it. And when they search your house, they'll find records linking you to several of the distribution addresses, bank deposits and accounts you didn't know you had. Very damning. My mind raced. They'd thought of everything. Built a frame around me and Devin while I'd been focused on Matthew. Vanessa will tell them the truth. Vanessa is in shock, being treated for a mental breakdown. Turns out her mother-in-law has been manipulating her, using her grief to draw her into criminal activity. She'll believe whatever Jim tells her to believe. Matthew checked his watch. We're on a timeline here. Backup is coming eventually. So let's wrap this up. Jim? Jim shifted the gun, now pointing it at me instead of Devin. I'm sorry, Diane. I really am. Terry was my friend. But business is business. You and Devin are going to walk into those woods. Nice and peaceful. When they find you in a few days, it'll look like you got disoriented, hypothermic. These things happen to people your age. And Devin? Devin, too. Father's death anniversary coming up. Grandson overcome with emotion. Grandmother trying to help. Tragedy. The kind that makes headlines for a day and then everyone forgets. Devin was shaking so hard I thought he might collapse. I wanted to reach for him, hold him, tell him everything would be all right. But I couldn't. Not yet. Before we go, I said carefully, I need to know. Did Terry suffer? When you killed him? Jim's expression flickered. Something that might have been remorse. It was quick. He never saw it coming. I made sure of that. That's something, I suppose. I lowered my hand slowly, reaching into my cardigan pocket. And all of this. The drug operation, the distribution network, using Devin. It's all about money. That's what my son died for? Money makes the world go round, Diane. Now stop stalling. Hands out of your pockets. Just one more thing I need to understand. My fingers closed around my phone. When did you place the tracking device on Devon's car? The real one, not my GPS system. Matthew and Jim exchanged a glance. That moment of confusion was all I needed. I pulled out my phone and held it up so they could see the screen. The active call to Detective Stabenow, timestamp showing it had been running for 12 minutes. Detective, I think you have everything you need now. Full confession to Terry's murder, conspiracy to commit murder, detailed description of evidence tampering and frame-up plans. How's the recording quality? The color drained from Jim's face. Matthew lunged forward, but I was already moving, throwing myself sideways as the cabin's front window exploded inward. Detective Stabenow came through first, weapon drawn, shouting commands. Drop the weapon! Hands up! Now! Everything happened at once. Jim swung his gun toward Stabenow, but Devon, brave, terrified Devon, threw himself backward, knocking into Jim's arm. The gun discharged, deafeningly loud in the small space, the bullet going wide and splintering wood above my head. 2 more officers crashed through the back door. Matthew tried to run, but Detective Stabenow was faster, taking him down with a textbook tackle. Jim raised his gun again, and this time he was aiming at Devon. "Jim, don't!" I screamed. But he never got the shot off. One of the officers fired, hitting Jim's shoulder, and the gun clattered across the floor. Within seconds, both men were on the ground, being handcuffed, reading their rights. I crawled to Devon, who'd collapsed against the wall, hyperventilating. "It's okay. You're safe. You're safe now." He grabbed me, sobbing, 18 years old and suddenly seeming like that little boy again. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry." He said. Matthew said if I didn't help him, he'd hurt Mom. Said he'd plant evidence, get her arrested. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't. Shh. I know. It's not your fault. I held him tightly, feeling him shake. "It's over now." Detective Stabenow approached, holstering her weapon. She looked at me with something between respect and exasperation. That was incredibly reckless. You could have been killed, but I wasn't. And now you have everything you need. I gestured to my phone, still recording. Jim's confession about Terry's murder. Matthew's frame-up plan. All of it. The recording might not be admissible in court, but it's enough to reopen Terry's case, to investigate Jim properly, to get warrants for the storage facility and all their distribution locations. I stood slowly, my knees protesting. And it's enough to protect Devon and Vanessa. They're victims, not criminals. She nodded, then looked at Devon. "We're still going to need your statement." "Everything Matthew had you do, everywhere he sent you, everyone you met. It won't be easy. I'll tell you everything." Devon wiped his eyes. "I should have told someone sooner. Should have been braver." "You were plenty brave," I said firmly. "You called me for help. You tried to escape. And you just saved my life by knocking Jim's arm. That's not cowardice, sweetheart. That's courage." As paramedics arrived to treat Jim's shoulder and check Devon for injuries, I watched them load Matthew and Jim into separate police vehicles. Jim wouldn't meet my eyes, but Matthew stared at me through the window, his expression cold and calculating even in defeat. Detective Stabenow stood beside me. He's going to lawyer up, claim he was coerced, that Jim was the mastermind. It's going to be a complicated prosecution. But you'll get them both? We'll get them. Especially with what we're going to find at that storage facility tonight. The raid's still on. We have probable cause now, and a recorded confession establishing the location. By midnight, we'll have enough evidence to put them away for decades. And Terry's case? Reopened as of right now. With Jim's confession on tape, we can subpoena his department records, phone logs, financial statements. If he tampered with the accident investigation, we'll find it. She paused. Terry was a good man, Diane. He deserves justice. He does. But more than that, he deserves to be remembered as the hero he was. A father who died trying to protect his son. As they loaded Devon into an ambulance for observation, I rode with him, holding his hand. He fell asleep within minutes, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. I watched him breathe, seeing Terry in every feature, the stubborn chin, the long fingers, the cowlick that never quite laid flat. At the hospital, Vanessa arrived with a police escort, her face pale and drawn. When she saw Devin, she broke down, and I held her while she cried. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "I swear I didn't know what Matthew was, what he was doing to Devin. I thought he was helping us, taking care of us after Terry died. He fooled everyone," I told her gently. "That's what predators do. They find our weaknesses and exploit them." Terry tried to tell me. She looked up at me, her eyes red. Those last few months, he kept saying something was wrong, that I should be careful around Matthew. I thought he was being paranoid, jealous. I dismissed him, and then he died, and I thought maybe his paranoia had caused the accident, made him distracted while driving. Terry wasn't paranoid. He was right, about everything. I squeezed her hand. "And you're a good mother, Vanessa. You were trying to survive, to build a life for Devin. Don't blame yourself for trusting the wrong person." By evening, the raid on the storage facility had concluded successfully. Detective Stabenow called with updates. They'd found over $200,000 in prescription medications, detailed records of the distribution network, and evidence linking Jim to 4 other unsolved deaths over the past decade. The operation was bigger than anyone had suspected. "Matthew is talking now," she said, "trying to cut a deal. He's giving us names, dealers, corrupt pharmacy employees, other officers on his payroll. This is going to shake up multiple departments across the state. And Jim? Lawyered up, but it doesn't matter. We have enough without his cooperation. The DA is talking about life sentences for both of them." I sat in the hospital waiting room, exhausted down to my bones, but feeling something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not happiness, not yet. But the weight that had settled on my chest the day Terry died had finally lifted. Devin would need therapy, time to heal from the trauma of being manipulated and controlled. Vanessa would need to rebuild her life, learn to trust her own judgment again, and I would need to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for not protecting them better. But we would do it together, as a family, the way Terry would have wanted. Detective Stabenow appeared in the waiting room doorway. "Diane, there's something you should see." She led me to a conference room where evidence from the storage facility was being cataloged. Among the boxes and bags, she pointed to a small fireproof safe. "We found this hidden in the back. Took us 3 hours to crack it. Inside was this." She handed me a sealed envelope with Terry's handwriting on the front. "To be opened only if something happens to me." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter, along with a USB drive. "Dear Diane, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and my suspicions about Matthew Holloway were right. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive. I didn't want to put you in danger, but I couldn't leave you completely in the dark either. The USB drive contains all my research on Matthew and Jim Patterson. Yes, Jim. I know it's hard to believe, but my investigation led me to evidence of his involvement in the distribution network. I confronted him 2 weeks ago. He denied everything, told me I was wrong, that Matthew was clean, but I saw the truth in his eyes. I've hidden this evidence where Matthew and Jim won't find it. If I die suspiciously, please give this to Detective Judith Stabenow. She's the only one I trust completely. Take care of Devin and Vanessa. Don't let them blame themselves. And remember, being smart is about knowing when to ask for help, when to trust your instincts, and when to fight for the people you love. I love you, Mom. I'm proud to be your son. Terry." Tears blurred the words. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling Terry's presence in every word. He'd known. He'd prepared. And even in death, he'd protected his family. The USB drive has everything we need to prove Jim was compromised years before Terry died. Detective Stabenow said softly, "Your son built an airtight case. He just didn't live long enough to deliver it. But I did." I looked at her. "Terry and I together, we got justice." She smiled. "Yes, you did. A detective and his brilliant mother. That's one for the case files." 3 months later, I stood in my kitchen making apple pie, Devin's favorite, and watching the late January snow fall softly over Cedar Falls. The house was warm, filled with the scent of cinnamon and butter, and for the first time in years, It felt like home again rather than a museum of grief. The trials had moved quickly once the evidence mounted. Matthew Holloway, or Martin Hollis, as the prosecution insisted on calling him, received 25 years for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, racketeering, and accessory to murder. His lawyer tried to paint him as a victim of Jim Patterson's manipulation, but the jury saw through it in less than 4 hours of deliberation. Jim Patterson's trial was harder to watch. I sat in the courtroom every day, needing to see justice done for Terry. The evidence was overwhelming. Terry's USB drive, the recorded confession at the cabin, financial records showing payments from Matthew, phone records placing him near the scene of Terry's accident. The defense tried to argue that the recording was inadmissible, obtained under duress, but the judge disagreed. Jim's own words had condemned him. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, I felt something inside me finally settle. Not happiness exactly. More like the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle completed, a wrong righted, a promise kept. Jim got life without parole. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Relief. The burden of living with what he'd done, of pretending to be Terry's friend while knowing he'd killed him, had been crushing him for 3 years. Prison, in a strange way, freed him from that pretense. I didn't forgive him, but I understood that people are complicated, capable of both loyalty and betrayal, love and murder. Understanding isn't the same as excusing. It's just seeing the whole truth instead of the parts we want to believe. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Vanessa's car in the driveway, the new one she'd bought with money from selling the house on Oakmont Drive. She couldn't live there anymore, not after everything that had happened. Too many memories, too many ghosts. "Come in," I called, wiping flour from my hands. Vanessa entered with Devin behind her, both of them carrying grocery bags. This had become our Sunday routine, cooking dinner together, talking, slowly rebuilding what Matthew had tried to destroy. Vanessa looked different now. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost, and there was color in her cheeks again. More importantly, there was light in her eyes. The hollow, frightened woman who'd answered her door 3 months ago had transformed into someone stronger, more aware. "Smells amazing in here," she said, setting bags on the counter. "I brought ingredients for the pot roast, and Devin picked out dessert wine, which seems redundant given the pie, but I'm not arguing." Devin managed a smile. He'd changed too, though his transformation was slower, more tentative. Therapy twice a week helped, but some scars take time to fade. He'd enrolled in community college for the spring semester, psychology, of all things. Said he wanted to understand manipulation, control, how people like Matthew operated, turn his trauma into something useful. I was proud of him for that. Proud of his courage in testifying against Matthew, even though reliving those months of coercion had clearly been painful. The prosecutor told me Devin's testimony had been crucial. His detailed account of the delivery routes, the threats Matthew made, the way he'd been isolated from friends and family. It painted a picture of systematic psychological abuse that the jury couldn't ignore. "How's the apartment?" I asked as Vanessa started unpacking vegetables. "Good. Small, but that's nice, actually. Manageable." She paused, knife hovering over a carrot. "Diane, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." Her tone made me look up. "What is it?" "I've been going to therapy. You know that. And my therapist helped me realize something important." She set down the knife, meeting my eyes. "I blamed Terry. After he died, I was so angry at him. Angry that he'd left us, that he'd been obsessed with Matthew, that he wouldn't just let it go. I thought his paranoia had caused the accident, made him distracted. Vanessa, let me finish. Please." She took a breath. "I blamed him, and that made it easier for Matthew to control me. He positioned himself as the opposite of Terry, relaxed, supportive, present. And I fell for it because I wanted someone who wasn't always suspicious, always worried. I chose comfort over truth." Devin had stopped unpacking groceries, listening to his mother with an intensity that suggested they'd discussed this before. "But Terry was right," Vanessa continued, tears welling in her eyes. "About everything. And if I'd listened to him, if I'd trusted him instead of being angry, maybe none of this would have happened. Devin wouldn't have been put through that nightmare. You wouldn't have been threatened. And we would have known the truth about Jim sooner. I moved around the counter and took her hands. Vanessa, listen to me. You're not responsible for what Matthew did, or what Jim did. You were a grieving widow trying to survive. Matthew saw that vulnerability and exploited it. That's not your fault. But I brought him into our lives. He would have found another way in. That's what predators do. They're patient. They watch for openings. I squeezed her hands. Terry wouldn't blame you. He'd be grateful you're safe, that Devin's safe, that you're both here, healing, moving forward. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I miss him. Every day I miss him. Me too. Devin cleared his throat. I miss him too. And I'm sorry, Mom. Sorry I didn't tell you what Matthew was making me do. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just making everything worse. Vanessa pulled him into a hug. We both made mistakes. We both have to forgive ourselves and each other. That's what family does. I watched them hold each other and felt the weight of the past 3 years finally lifting, not disappearing. Grief doesn't work that way, but becoming bearable, transforming from a crushing burden into something we could carry together. As we cooked dinner, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Devin's classes, Vanessa's new job at a medical clinic, my plans for spring gardening, normal things. Beautiful, ordinary, precious normal things. But there was still something I needed to say, something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I've made a decision, I announced as we sat down to eat. About the house. They both looked at me, concerned. The house was mine. Terry had grown up here, and I'd lived here for 40 years. But it was big, expensive to maintain, full of stairs my aging knees complained about. I'm not selling, I said quickly, seeing their worry. But I'm not going to live here alone anymore. I want you both to move in. You and Devin, Vanessa. There's plenty of room. Devin can have his own space for studying. You'd save money on rent. And I paused, feeling emotion tighten my throat. I'd like to have family around. To not spend my evenings alone, wondering if I remembered to lock all the doors. Vanessa's eyes widened. Diane, that's incredibly generous. But we couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. It's practical. Devin needs stability while he's in school. You need time to rebuild your savings after everything Matthew destroyed financially. And I smiled. I need the sound of voices in this house again. Laughter. Life. This place has been a tomb long enough. Devin looked at his mother, then at me. Are you sure, Grandma? I mean, I'm not the quietest person. Late-night study sessions, friends coming over sometimes. Good. This house needs noise, needs energy. I reached across the table, taking both their hands. We're family. We've survived something terrible together. Now let's build something good together. What do you say? Vanessa's tears were flowing freely now, but she was smiling. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Devin nodded, his own eyes bright. Yeah. Okay. That sounds really good. After dinner, while they were packing up leftovers to take home, soon to be unnecessary, I thought with satisfaction, Detective Stabenow called. Diane, I wanted to give you an update. The appeals court upheld Jim's conviction this afternoon. His lawyers tried to argue procedural errors, but the judges weren't buying it. He's done. It's over. I stepped into the living room for privacy. And Matthew? Also denied appeal. He's been transferred to a maximum security facility in Michigan. Word is he's not adjusting well to prison life. Turns out manipulating people is harder when everyone knows exactly who you are. Good. I felt no sympathy. Matthew had destroyed lives without remorse. He'd used grief and fear as weapons. He deserved every moment of discomfort. There's something else, Detective Stabenow continued. We finished our investigation into the wider network. Found evidence linking Matthew's operation to 17 other cases across 4 states. Your testimony, Devin's testimony, Terry's evidence, it all created a domino effect. We've made 37 additional arrests in the past 3 months. Shut down 5 major distribution channels. Terry would be proud. He should be. His investigation was brilliant, methodical, careful, thorough. He built a case that held up even 3 years after his death. That's the work of an exceptional detective. She paused. And his mother turned out to be pretty exceptional, too. I've recommended you for a civilian commendation, for bravery and assistance in bringing down a criminal organization. I don't need a commendation. I just needed my grandson safe. You got both. Not many people could have done what you did, Diane. Staying calm under pressure, gathering evidence, trusting your instincts. You saved Devon's life, probably Vanessa's too, and you got justice for Terry. That's a victory by any measure. After we hung up, I sat quietly in Terry's favorite chair, the worn leather recliner by the window where he used to read the newspaper. From here, I could see the driveway where Devon used to practice basketball shots, the maple tree Terry planted when he was 10, the porch where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Sundays. This house held so much history, so much love and loss and life. And now it would hold more. A new chapter. With Vanessa and Devon. With healing and hope and second chances. I pulled out Terry's journal, which I'd kept in a drawer beside the chair. I read his final entry again, the one where he'd written about protecting his family, about doing what was right even when it was hard. Then I picked up a pen and added my own entry on the blank page that followed. Dear Terry, it's done. Matthew and Jim are in prison. Devon is safe. Vanessa is healing. We're going to be okay. You taught me something I didn't fully understand until now. That strength isn't about physical power or fearlessness. It's about showing up even when you're terrified. About trusting your instincts even when everyone tells you you're wrong. About protecting the people you love no matter the cost. I'm 64 years old. People look at me and see a grandmother, someone past her prime, someone to be dismissed or underestimated. Matthew certainly did. Jim did too. But they forgot that age brings wisdom, that 64 years of living means 64 years of learning, observing, understanding how people work. It means knowing when to push and when to wait, when to confront and when to listen, when to trust and when to question. You were 36 when you died, Terry. So young, but you were smart enough to know you needed help, smart enough to leave evidence behind, smart enough to trust that the people who loved you would finish what you started. Together we got justice. Father and mother, detective and grandmother. That's a pretty good team. Devon and Vanessa are moving in. This house will be full of life again. It's what you would have wanted. I love you. I'm proud of you. Rest now. We've got this. Mom. I closed the journal and sat watching the snow fall, feeling at peace in a way I hadn't since the day Terry died. The doorbell rang again. Through the window, I saw Devon's car still in the driveway. He'd forgotten something. But when I opened the door, he wasn't reaching for a forgotten item. He was just standing there, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. Can we talk for a minute, Grandma? Of course. Come in. We sat at the kitchen table, and he was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. I need to tell you something, he finally said. When I was delivering those packages for Matthew, I knew it was wrong. Not at first. At first, I believed his story about documents and consulting. But after a few weeks, I knew. The places I was going, the people I was meeting, the way they'd hand me money or take the packages without saying a word. I knew. Devon, let me finish. Please. He looked up, and I saw the same determination Terry used to have. I knew it was wrong, but I was scared. Matthew said if I stopped, he'd hurt Mom. Said he'd frame her for money laundering, get her arrested. And I believed him because he showed me proof. Bank statements with her name, deposits she didn't know about. He said one phone call, and her life was over. Tears ran down his face. So I kept doing it. I told myself I was protecting her. But really, I was just a coward. I should have come to you sooner. Should have gone to police. Should have trusted that there was a way out. Dad would have found a way out. He wouldn't have let himself be controlled like that. I reached across the table, taking his hand. Your father was a trained police officer with years of experience. You're an 18-year-old kid who was targeted by a professional manipulator. There's no comparison, Devon. None. But I should have been stronger. You were strong. You survived. You called me for help when you were ready. You testified against Matthew even though you were terrified. You knocked Jim's gun aside even though you could have been shot. That's not cowardice, sweetheart. That's courage. It doesn't feel like courage. Courage never does. It feels like terror and doubt and doing the right thing anyway. I squeezed his hand. And here's what I've learned in my 64 years. We all make mistakes. We all have moments where we're not as brave or smart or strong as we wish we'd been. What matters is what we do next. Do we give up? Blame ourselves forever? Or do we learn, grow, and become better? He wiped his eyes. I want to be better. I want to make Dad proud. You already do. Every single day you make him proud. I smiled. Moving in here, going back to school, getting therapy, facing your fears. That's what being better looks like. Not some dramatic transformation. Just steady, quiet progress. One day at a time. He nodded, and we sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Grandma? He said finally. Thank you. For not giving up on me. For risking your life to find me. For everything. That's what grandmothers do, honey. We protect our families. Even when we're scared. Even when we're 64 and everyone thinks we're too old to fight anymore. I grinned. Turns out we're tougher than we look. He laughed. The first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in months. Matthew definitely learned that lesson. Yes, he did. After Devin left, I stood in my kitchen, soon to be our kitchen, and felt the weight of the past 3 months settle into something manageable. The mystery was solved. The criminals were imprisoned. My family was healing. Terry's legacy was honored. I'd done what I set out to do, not through violence or force, not through wealth or connections, but through patience, intelligence, observation, and the stubborn refusal to let the people I loved be destroyed by predators. Age had given me that. 64 years of learning how people worked, how systems worked, how to ask the right questions and trust my instincts. 64 years of quiet strength that Matthew and Jim had underestimated until it was too late. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Cedar Falls in white, clean, fresh, a new beginning. I pulled the pie from the oven, golden and perfect, and set it on the windowsill to cool. Tomorrow, Devin and Vanessa would start moving their things in. The house would be full of boxes and laughter and life. But tonight, I stood alone in my kitchen, looking at Terry's photograph on the refrigerator, and whispered, "We did it, son. Together, we did it." And in the quiet of that snowy evening, I could almost feel him there. Proud, grateful, at peace. Justice, family, truth, legacy. These were the things that mattered. These were the things worth fighting for. And I'd fought. At 64 years old, I'd fought and won. Not with weapons or violence, not with anger or revenge, but with wisdom, with patience, with love. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.